This Pro Tour top 8 is fucked.
Yeah.
Can I say fucked?
I don't know.
Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Eternal Witnesses. I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Mapson.
And today we're going to be talking about the state of Modern after the Pro Tour. So let's jump right into some of these deck lists. Why don't we look at the two Affinity decks that made it into the top 8?
Okay, so we had Pascal Maynard and Patrick Diekman, who we know as being the Twin expert, but unfortunately for him, Twin was banned, although he did say he was not planning to be on that for this event anyways. So Affinity was pretty well placed for this event. It was one of the largest decks coming in. It was actually tied for first with Burn, and it put up much better results than Burn.
Mm-hmm.
The lists are pretty stock. They didn't get many upgrades. The only real change is, I know one of them, I can't remember which one, was playing Seagate Wreckage in their sideboard, which is an interesting card from Oath of the Gatewatch, but otherwise it's the same Affinity deck we've always seen, pretty stock, just trying to put out a lot of artifacts fast and kill its opponent.
That was Pascal's deck that was running the Seagate Wreckage in the board.
Okay.
So why do you think that Burn wasn't able to do so well, but Affinity was?
So I think one of the main differences there is the Eldrazi decks that we're going to discuss in a minute were playing Chalice of the Void, and Chalice of the Void is huge game against the Burn decks. They just, like, they need their 1-drops and they need their 2-drops. If you can put a Chalice on those numbers, they're just dead. Affinity can get their spells out faster because they're playing 0-drops and they just have mana accelerants in the forms of Mox Opal and Springleaf Drum. So they can force down their spells before that Chalice can ever get deployed. And also, they have a better matchup against the Eldrazi decks because they can attack in the air with Inkmoth Nexus and Blinkmoth Nexus and Signal Pest. And those are cards that the Eldrazi decks don't really have a good way to answer.
Yeah, it looks like unless you're running the blue-red version, you're not going to have too many flyers other than Blinkmoth Nexus.
They do have the Ratchet Bomb, so that could be awkward, but they're only running 2 of that, so.
Was there anything else about the Affinity list that you liked that they were running that was a reason why they were able to do so well?
Looking at the list again, not really. I mean, like I said, they're pretty stock, just the same list that we've been seeing for a while. I do like the inclusion of Stubborn Denial.
I love that
Not
card.
necessarily anything to do with the deck, I just think that card's sweet.
All right, so why don't we talk about the least played Eldrazi deck, which is the Processor Eldrazi deck piloted by Frank Lepore.
Okay, so I thought it was really cool that he top-8'd it. This was his first Pro Tour, and he's been on the scene for a while. He actually qualified for this Pro Tour a while ago when him and Melissa Del Toro were able to draw with each other into the top 8 of a GP. But due to her working at Wizards and him living with her, he was not allowed to play. So I think it's really cool that this was his first Pro Tour and he hadn't been allowed to play Sanctioned Magic for a while, and he just crushed it. Like, he made his way all the way to the top 8, playing a little bit of a homebrew it harkens back to the older Eldrazi decks we had before Oath of the Gatewatch came out, with the fact that it's still playing all these processors. I think it's really cool. The Relics randomly will give you games sometimes against decks like Abzan Company, which is not one of the Eldrazi decks' better matchups. It just has a lot of really interesting choices. The fact that he's playing Cavernous Souls meant that he got to play the 3 different color Eldrazi. He got to play Worldbreaker, which is insane in the mirror. Wasteland Strangler, which is just very good against this very creature-heavy format.
Yeah, Wasteland Strangler seems huge in the deck. It almost seems like one of the main reasons to run this deck.
Right, and Drowner of Hope, which just kind of puts you over the top. So I think that this was a really well-done deck, especially for the fact that his testing team consisted of him and 2 other people. I think he really nailed it out of the park, and I can't wait to see him back on the Pro Tour.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really sets this Eldrazi deck apart from the others is the addition of that Relic of Progenitus, which the other ones aren't running. So let's take a look at the colorless Eldrazi deck, which was the most represented, even though it wasn't able to clinch the victory.
Right, so this one was actually my favorite. Team Channel Fireball and Face-to-Face Games worked together to form a super team, if you will, to create this deck. Sam Pardee came up with the majority of it, but it was edited over time, and became this absolute monster that you see before you. It's really a very aggressive deck. It does the same thing as the other Eldrazi decks, playing off of Eye of Ugin and Eldrazi Temple to just throw out creatures as fast as it can. But the inclusion of Eye of Ugin with Eldrazi Mimic means that you can just have multiple creatures on turn 1, and then if you followed up turn 2 with a Thought Knot Seer, then all of a sudden they're 4/4s for a turn and they get to attack, and then turn 3 you can just play a Reality Smasher and your opponent's probably dead.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of the vintage shops decks, where you're just pumping out so many threats with fast mana, and being able to play 2 or more creatures on turn 1 if you have the Eldrazi Mimics in your hand and the Eye of Ugin just seems insane.
Right, this deck's it's straight gas. It's just really good. They have Chalice of the Void to kind of shut off the other aggressive decks too, because even though it's aggressive, its curve is still 4 drops and 5 drops, and it just accelerates into them with these lands. Plus Simian Spirit Guide means it can play a 5-drop as early as turn 2. That's insane. That's not something that typically happens.
I mean, just being able to go turn 1 Chalice, go, it can just shut so many decks out, like burn that, like you were talking about earlier.
It's really good. This deck is insane. What unfortunately it lacks, though, is it doesn't have that many answers for things. It plays Ratchet Bomb, which is kind of a catch-all, but it's a little bit slow.
Yeah.
And then other than that, it has 4 Dismembers main deck, but that's really the only form of removal it can afford. Also, the mana base can be a little bit shaky at times. This deck is so reliant on Eye of Ugin that you'll find that it mulligans a lot. It's very inconsistent in that regards, but it's just so powerful that it doesn't matter, because even if you give up a game based off of your mulligans, if you're just killing your opponent on turn 3, turn 4, whatever, before they have a chance to fight, then you can give up a game sometimes.
Yeah, and I was surprised how good Ghost Quarter was, especially in the mirror matches. In the top 8, Ghost Quarter was just almost strip mine most of the time.
Ghost Quarter is insane in this deck. It also, the hidden application is if your opponent plays a Blood Moon, then you can Ghost Quarter your own land to find your waste, the new colorless basic. LSV was saying that they actually Ghost Quarter themselves more than they Ghost Quarter their opponents.
Well, that's fun tech. All right, let's move on to the blue-red Eldrazi deck. There were 2 in the top 8, and it actually ended up winning the Pro Tour.
Yep, in the hands of JC Tao. This deck is very well built to win the Eldrazi mirror match.
I agree.
This team realized, hey, this Eldrazi deck is stupid good, let's just beat them. So having cards like Eldrazi Obligator and Drowner of Hope is just so insane in the mirror, because you can just take your opponent's creatures or you can tap them down. You can kind of just go bigger than them. It's weird because on the surface it just looks like almost a draft deck with cards like Bonsai. I can't even remember the name.
Vile Aggregate and Sky Spawner.
Vile Aggregate. Whoever thought they'd see that card in Constructed?
I do love Sky Spawner. Personally, that card is also in my cube.
I mean, the card's good. The card's great. But, like, would you have really thought it would win a Modern Pro Tour?
Probably not.
Yeah, no. Not on my radar.
I think there's something also to be said for the amount of Eldrazi Scions this deck can make compared to the other ones. And even though the deck can be very explosive and really fast coming out of the gate, you're just creating so many chump blockers with your Sky Spawner and your Drowner of Hope that unless they have a Reality Smasher on board, they're not going to be able to get that damage through. And this deck has more access to flyers with Sky Spawner and the man lands that we talked about before. And then it can also use the Obligator to steal some of those larger creatures from the mirror matches.
So much staying power in this deck.
Yeah.
I mean, all the Eldrazi decks have a lot of staying power. Even just when they're going long, just being able to slam a huge endless one. Just everything these decks do is go big.
I think that card out of all the Eldrazi was the most surprising one for me. I did not see Endless One coming as like one of the mainstays of the deck.
Card was great. I can't remember a Hydra ever being so good. Just the mana in this deck is insane.
Yeah, this type of mana with the Soul Land should just not be allowed in Modern. And personally, I hope something gets banned. We'll get to that.
A lot of people agree with you on that one.
I think my favorite land in the deck, though, is Gemstone Caverns.
Gemstone Caverns, pretty spicy. I know the colorless Eldrazi deck considered it. They ultimately decided it wasn't worth running, but it's a very cool land.
I know we got to see him put it into play. Was that in game 3 or game 4?
Can't remember offhand.
I just remember the commentator saying, if you're going to put a luck counter on anything, it might as well be the finals of the Pro Tour. All right, why don't we check out the board of this one? Because I think this deck is interesting, but if I could play any Eldrazi deck, this isn't the one that I would choose. But it turns out that in a top 8 with 6 Eldrazi decks, it was just the best in the mirror match.
Absolutely.
So how do you feel about Spellskite in this type of deck?
Spellskite's great in any kind of deck.
I agree.
It's possibly the best sideboard card in the format. I mean, like, it stops everything. Oh, you have a path, let me redirect that. Oh, you want to become a Mincer Infect creature? Let me redirect that. Oh, even just like a bolt. You take it from 3 damage, make it 2 damage. Spellskite's just good against everything.
Yeah, Spellskite's just awesome, and it is just everywhere in Modern. So this deck is actually running its Chalice of the Voids in the sideboard, and there's actually only 2 compared to the full 4 that you're seeing in some of the colorless builds.
Still a great card, though.
Still good, even without Simian Spirit Guide.
Some people say Magic is a zero-sum game, meaning there's a set amount of fun that can be had. And so I know when I play, my goal is to have all of that fun, and so any amount of fun my opponent is having is fun I'm not having, so Chalice is great for stopping them from having the fun.
And then you've got 2 Gut Shot, which of course is going to help against all those smaller creature decks. I know LSV had joked about his opponent being at 1 and being able to Gut Shot them, and then he actually drew Gut Shot against Frank Lepore and was able to kill him while he was at 1 life.
This top 8 was really weird.
It definitely
Gut
was.
Shots, Cavern of Souls naming Ape. That was my favorite moment.
Playing a Simian Spirit Guide off of a Cavern naming Ape.
Man.
The Grey Ogre beats. They're real.
I would know better than most. They are very real.
You would know. This deck is also playing Stubborn Denial on the board. I think you're much more likely to be able to get the Ferocity on that one. Is it Ferocity?
Ferocious.
Ferocious. Get the Ferocious on Stubborn Denial.
That sounds really weird to say like that.
It does.
I mean, like, you're right, but still
I like
weird.
Ferocity better.
I agree.
And then it also has 2 Relica Progenitus to deal with graveyard decks. I know we had talked previously about Living Death being...
Living End.
Living End, I apologize. You can see how much I don't know anything about Modern. So then there's 3 Hercules Recall in the deck.
Great card.
Great card.
Really good against Affinity. Like, really good.
Mm-hmm.
The best is when you get to get their Glimmer Voids. That's a good feeling.
That is a good feeling. Suck it, lands.
Am I a monster? I think I might be a monster.
You are the worst.
Makes sense.
And then last but certainly not least, the one of Tomb of the Spirit Dragon.
Let's gain all that life.
Gain it all.
Screw you, Burn. Screw you.
Because our Chalice of the Voids apparently aren't enough.
I mean, go big or go home, right?
So that's going to do it for the Eldrazi decks. Why don't we take a look at Jason Chung's Blue Moon deck?
Okay, so Blue Moon is personally one of my favorite archetypes. I love Jason Chung's list. He almost made it into the top 8, but in round 16, the final round, Yvonne Flock and Shuhei Nakamura both decided to play it out, despite the fact neither of them needed to. Flock ended up knocking Jason Chung out of the top 8, which is
brutal.
Sad, yeah.
Brutal.
Knocking him to 10th place, and Shuhei actually played against JC Tao, who ended up winning the whole thing, and beat him, but JC made it into the top 8 as 8th seed on Breakers, and then just had his comeback and revenge by beating everyone, which
seems good.
Pretty good way to do it.
Hey, yeah.
So Jason Chung, his Blue Moon deck, probably inspired by his teammates' win with it, Li Shixian, a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been updated. The creatures now are 4 Snapcasters and 3 PN Kieran.
I love what P and Kieran Nallar have been doing to Modern.
They are great.
That card is amazing.
So PN Kieran is kind of taking the place of Teferi. They do vastly different things, so maybe I shouldn't say taking the place, but that was the only other real creature threat that the deck had before.
Right.
It is still relying on the Batterskulls as the win condition. It has dropped the Vidalcan Shackles, which is personally one of my favorite cards in the archetype.
Yeah, that's interesting. Vidalcan Shackles seems like a really powerful card.
Vidalcan Shackles is great, but I don't know that it's the best time for it in the metagame right now. It's a little bit slow when your opponent is casting a 5/5 on turn 3. So
yeah, it's hard to argue with that.
PN Kieran is great because it can provide chump blockers. and it can kind of answer a lot of the creatures in the format. So it's really good. This deck is all around sweet in my opinion. It basically just functions as a draw-go deck with Burst Lightnings, Cryptic Commands, Lightning Bolts, Mana Leak, Spell Snare, Remand. I love the Spell Snares. I love their inclusion here. They're just so good against so many things.
They're great against burn. There are just so many 2-drops in that deck that they're going to need to resolve to finish you off and kill you. And pretty much all of the counterspells in Modern are 2-drops, other than the spell snares themselves.
Right. This format resolves around 2-drops and 4-drops. So the last card that's really pivotal to this deck is, of course, the namesake Blood Moon. So Blood Moon is really good. This
Yes, it is.
format is full of greedy mana bases. The mana bases are just so greedy in this format.
Definitely.
And it just shuts them all down. And it shuts down the mana base in the Eldrazi deck. It shuts down the mana base in Jund, Bug decks, Asper decks. Just any tricolor deck can't really beat it. And even a lot of the 2-color decks struggle against it. So this card's just great. And so you're playing 4 off the premise of it'll be good the majority of the time. And you can function through it much better than other people. This deck actually seems, and a lot of people agree, that it's pretty well positioned against the Eldrazi decks. The one change that I know I personally would make is I would probably cut the Burst Lightning for something like Roast, which I think is really good against that deck.
I think that's a really good idea. I think 5 toughness is what you really need to be able to overcome in this format.
Right. Roast can kill the Thought-Knot Seer. It can kill their Reality Smasher. Out of other decks, it can kill Tasker, Gurmag Angler, Siege Rhino,
Drowner of Hope.
Drowner of Hope, most infect creatures through a pump spell or 2. I just think that Roast is a magnificent card, and I think that's
Definitely.
where I would want to be right now. So I can say this is a deck I'll be playing going forward.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a good meta choice for your local tournaments, or even if you're going to a bigger event and if you expect a lot of Eldrazi.
Especially the Spreading Seas and the sideboard are also very good against the Eldrazi decks.
I think that might be my favorite card in the sideboard of this deck is the Spreading Seas. Just being able to curve out with your land hate cards, going turn 2 Spreading Seas into turn 3 Blood Moon, especially if you're on the play, a lot of decks aren't going to be able to come back from that.
I'll be honest, I just don't like when my opponents play Magic.
Who wants their opponents to ever play Magic?
I don't know. My turn is the best part of the game by far.
So let's take a look at the red-green Scapeshift deck.
Okay.
I know this is a personal favorite of yours.
Yet another one. Yep. I just went 4-0 with this deck at an event earlier this week.
I mean, let's not brag, but
Sorry.
go on.
I mean, I'm just great, so it's hard not to. But anyways,
You are literally the worst.
great, the worst, whatever. It's all the same thing. Even if you might not think I'm great, can we at least agree this deck is great?
This deck is great.
So it's really just a much more streamlined version of the Scapeshift decks that we've seen before it. I believe it's pronounced Than Win. Sorry if I screwed that up, but he top-8'd GP Pittsburgh with it, and then this deck has been all over the Star City circuit, and now he had an excellent result at this Pro Tour. He metagamed great by including spell skites for Burn, Affinity, and Infect, which were all over the place, even if they didn't put up the best numbers. But this list is basically just all in on casting Prime Titan or Escape Shift as soon as it can, which is usually by turn 4. I mean, there's really not that much to say about it. It just goes fast. It literally does not care what your opponent is doing. You just go, you know what, this is my deck. I'm going to race. I'm going to ignore you and kill you.
You have the counterspell? Nope. You're
Even
dead.
if they have the counterspell, you just jam another threat the next turn. And they
Doesn't
die
even
anyways.
matter.
I've personally been playing it with Summoning Trap, so that's another way to get through counterspells. If they like spell snare your Secure Tribalder on turn 2, and you just get to Summoning Trap into a Prime Titan, they're dead. 100% of the time, they're dead.
All right, let's talk about the Death's Shadow deck that was actually doing fairly well.
The surprise.
Yes.
Very much a fringe deck, although it has been doing slightly better on Moto lately. Just a lot of people were on this deck. It's a very aggressive deck. It's very much like the Zoo decks. It has this element of paying your life for things. So perhaps it was a good choice when you're expecting a lot of burn, because their game plan is kind of adding to your game plan, because you're just going all in on getting this Death Shadow, and it gets huge really fast in a format full of ship probes and fetch lands and shock lands. You even have Street Wraith to just cycle through your deck
I love
as
Street
fast
Wraith.
as you can. And it includes the standard combo of Teamer Battle Rage and Become Immense, which just massive points of damage.
Yeah, you got to be able to give something double strike.
Just insane how fast this deck can kind of goldfish and race.
All right, so let's talk about some of the Infect lists that we saw at the Pro Tour. Now, it didn't make it into top 8, but I know Infect has been a huge deck in Modern.
Right, so this was one of the most played decks. It put up decent results, not the best, but it is still a very strong deck. It's capable of killing as early as turn 2. Actually, a fair number of people were calling for a ban of some of the cards. I don't personally think that's necessary, but I can say I've been on the wrong side of a few turn 2 kills, and it can be pretty unpleasant. The deck just kind of goes all in on getting one creature out and making it huge and killing you.
I was surprised we actually didn't see this deck in the top 8. I thought it would actually fare well against the Eldrazi decks.
Well, it's because Tom Ross wasn't there.
Ah.
If Tom Ross was there, then he would have just killed everyone, because that's what he does.
Yeah, no one's going to go to work if the boss isn't in. All right, let's talk about the Abzan Company decks. I know there were 2 different versions that we wanted to talk about.
Okay, so the Abzan Company decks were actually the second highest performing deck behind the Eldrazi decks, which it's pretty good, but I mean, everything just paled in comparison to the Eldrazi decks.
Right? Like, how do you beat that deck? I still don't even know.
Blue Moon, I'm telling you.
I guess.
Or Racing with Scapeshift. But anyways, so this deck has been putting up great results online. It put up great results at the Pro Tour. It can provide a lot of chump blockers, and a lot of the creatures just come back. So just chump blockers for days. Since most of the Eldrazi decks are cutting their Relic, they don't really have a good way to interact with this deck. The deck kind of, I mean, it can just kill as early as turn 3. If it goes turn 1 Mana Dork, turn 2 Kitchen Finks, turn 3 Anafenza Viscera Seer, gain infinite life. Technically they're not dead, but the Eldrazi deck cannot be infinite life. So deck's great. There's also the Archangel of Thune Spike Feeder combo that's been popping up. It's built basically the same thing, except it's not as reliant on Collected Company because it cannot hit Archangel of Thune.
Right.
The general principle is Archangel of Thune is a better creature than either Melira or Anafenza, and it's very reminiscent of the old pod decks that the Abzan Company decks were based off of. So same central goal. You're just trying to kill them with slightly different creatures. Also, you only need 2 combo pieces rather than 3.
That's definitely fair. Did any of the Kiki Cord decks do well at the Pro Tour?
Not really. Eric Froelich, who I believe is ranked currently the 2nd player in the world behind Owen Turtenwald, was advocating that deck, and he played it there. But I don't think he had the greatest finish, which is a shame because that is another one of my favorite decks.
Yeah, I really like that deck.
Deck's awesome.
All right, so let's talk about Living End and why we might see more of that deck in the future.
Okay, so a lot of people are speculating Living End might be really good against the Eldrazi decks. So Living End is known for playing 4 main deck Fulminator Mages in addition to Simian Spirit Guides, so it can have a Fulminator Mage out on turn 2, and as we said earlier, if you can disrupt the deck's mana, that's really good. So being able to blow up their Eye of Ugin on turn 2 is insane, and you get to repeatedly do that. They don't have a way to interact with the graveyard. The awkward thing, though, is that since they have Chalice, if they put Chalice on 0, that kind of stops your game plan. So, you know, you win some, you lose some. But people are saying, oh, well, play Ingot Chewer main deck as a way to answer Chalice. That also works with the deck's plan. So it could very well be a big contender moving forward, but we will have to reshape the way the deck works.
Now, are any of the Living End players worried about the amount of Relic of Progenitus that might still be in the main deck for some of the Eldrazi decks, even if it's not in the main deck in all of them?
As somebody who plays the deck online, I can say it's definitely something to be wary of. Unfortunately, at least on Magic Online, the numbers of Relic are still kind of high, but they're on the decline, I think, as more people switch to this deck. And if you know what you're doing, you can play around it. And like I said, you can include Ingot Chewer main deck. If you wanted to, you also could include Abrupt Decay, although that's pretty uncommon. And also you have Beast Within main deck. So there's ways to deal with the Relic.
I love Beast Within. What a great card. All right, let's talk about Lantern Control. This is personally probably my favorite deck in Modern right now.
Okay, this deck A lot of people hate it. I think it's really interesting. I'm a big fan of prison decks. All my fun. That's all I want. So
Nothing like locking your opponent out from doing anything.
it's great. Why should they get to do things?
I play Miracles in Legacy. I completely
Right.
understand.
They didn't ask for permission.
No spells for you.
So the deck is great. Sam Black played it to a very high finish at this Pro Tour. He's been advocating the deck for a while. So Ensnaring Bridge is really hard for the Eldrazi decks to deal with. The only real way they have to beat it in their 75 is with Ratchet Bomb, which is just very slow.
Yeah.
So this deck can answer that with Abrupt Decay. It can answer it with Pithing Needle. It just has so many ways to shut down their only answer to Ensnaring Bridge, which completely hoses their entire deck. And the deck empties out its hand very fast, and you really only need to get your hand below 4 cards to stop the majority of their creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as long as the Lantern control players up their number of Ensnaring Bridge, the matchup should be pretty easy for them.
Okay, so for the record, Ryan would like us to now talk about the deck that he likes to call Mardu.
That's not true.
So Paul Rietzel piloted this Mardu deck,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he actually did really well with it. Ryan really likes this deck, so let's talk about it.
Right. Well, he was not the only person on it. I believe Ben Stark was the other person. I want to say it was actually his creation. The deck's really interesting. It feels a lot like one of the green-black X decks, despite the fact it doesn't have green. It's playing the typical Lily of the Veil, the Dark Confidants, the Fulminator Mage, the Thought Seizes, the Lingering Souls, Inquisition. But where it gets really spicy is it's playing one of Ajani Vengeance, a deck that we've seen out of the Jeskai control builds.
I love a Johnny Vengeance. That's just a great underutilized Planeswalker.
I do not like it personally. I don't think that the
That's
plus
too
does
bad.
enough. Every time I minus it, I feel like he dies. I just don't have much love for this card. Also, I had it ultimate against me twice in Legacy once, so that was pretty demoralizing.
You got riggedy wrecked.
I still almost won that game. I was 1 mana short. Very unfortunate. But what I do like about this list is the 2 Abbot of Carol Keep. I really like that card. It's a great source of card advantage. It reminds me a lot of Chandra Pyremaster, one of my favorite cards. And I think Prowess is a sweet mechanic.
I think Prowess is a great mechanic. I'm really glad that they made it evergreen.
Same. So this deck is just really innovative, and I would be interested to see if people will play it going forward.
How do you think it fares against the Eldrazi decks?
I'm not sure. The fact that it has a Fulminator Mage main deck makes me feel like the matchup can't be that great.
Yeah, plus the 4 Inquisition of Kozilek aren't going to have too many targets. And
You
that's
can
if.
hit an Eldrazi Mimic, and that's about it.
Yeah, and that's assuming the Chalice hasn't already landed for 1. Was there anything else you want to talk about with this
No.
deck? All right, sweet.
I don't even like this list. I just think it's cool that it
Then
exists.
why the fuck?
Because it's really interesting that they made it. It's cool that it exists. It's not my style, though. I would never touch it.
All right, let's get on to the real shit. Let's talk about some real fucking shit right now. So what do you think the Pro Tour would look like if Twin was not banned?
I mean, Twin would top. That's what that deck does. That's why they banned it.
It's a very strong deck. How do you think it fares against the Eldrazi decks that we saw in the top 8?
I think that it would be a good matchup for Twin. I can't be sure one way or the other, but I imagine Blue-Red Twin would have a very good time playing against that kind of matchup. I think that the Blue-Red would be the best form for this. I don't think that the Grixis list would do as well. I don't think the Teamer list would do as well. But I think if you go with the real streamlined approach, you can probably just kill them very easily. The Eldrazi decks don't really have much in the way of interaction. They have Ratchet Bomb, they have Dismember, and they have Chalice. That's it. Chalice doesn't stop any of the important spells for the most part if they're playing it for 1. And the Ratchet Bombs are just way too slow because you have to take it up to 3. I think that it would be
Right.
easy enough for Twin to just go, oh, turn 3, let me play this creature, tap your Reality Smasher. Turn 4, oh, look, you're dead.
Yeah, I think with Twin versus the Eldrazi decks, you're not going to be winning with the more tempo-y damage plan that some of the Twin decks used to win with. You're not going to cast your Goy for your Tasigur and be able to get through the Eldrazi deck. You're just looking to combo them out before they can kill you.
Absolutely. Also, in the Blue-Red Twin list, sometimes they'll play a 1 of Flame Slash, or some have played up to 2 copies of Roast or Harvest Pyre, and those cards seem very good against the Eldrazi decks.
Good old Harvest Pyre.
Yeah, I don't know how that made it in there, but BBD top 8'd a GP with it, so
Almost.
can't be too bad.
Almost makes you wish you had a Boros Reckoner somewhere in the 75. That was a sweet standard deck.
It
just,
was.
Just say that was a sweet standard deck. So do you think that banning Twin was a calculated move to have the Eldrazi kind of take over so that Wizards of the Coast could sell more Oath of the Gatewatch packs?
I think it was calculated, but I don't think so in the way that most people think it was. So the Pro Tour it's just a giant ad for Wizards, honestly. They run this tournament for free and they pay out tons of money. They're doing that because they're making money. They're putting their best players on display, and thousands of people are at home watching this and going, oh, look, Paul Cheon played this deck. I want to play that. Oh, look, LSV played this deck and did really well. I want to do that. Oh, look, Reed Dukes. So, like, I don't know why I picked all-channel Fireball people, but...
Because you're incredibly biased and the worst?
Not the worst. Apparently not channel Fireball people are the worst.
I don't know. It seems like a lot of them were in the top 8 and, in fact, the top 25.
Yeah. They did really well.
Did insanely well.
The team crushed it. But so the whole thing is just a giant ad. And if Twin is still in the format, and if Twin just dominates this Pro Tour like it's been doing it at events for so long, they're not going to sell any packs. That's really what the Pro Tour is about. That's why it's typically standard. In fact, I think if this hadn't been a modern Pro Tour, Twin would probably still be in the format. But unfortunately, as long as it's a Pro Tour format, every year they're going to keep banning cards to shake up the format. It's really what they have to do. And
do you think Wizards is kind of heavy-handed in that way, and they might be banning too much or too quickly, or not allowing players to adapt to the format, and they're just getting rid of popular or the most powerful decks?
I don't think you can really say that, though, because Twin has been around since the format premiered. GP Philly, the first modern GP, it won. So Twin has been, I think Twin has top 8'd every modern Pro Tour and has top 8'd just about every modern GP. The deck's been around, so people have had time to adapt.
So I think when it comes to Wizards and banning certain decks, I know that for me personally, when I was getting into Modern, I was trying to build Kiki Pod, and I had gotten my playset of Birthing Pods, and I had started getting my mana base together when Birthing Pod was finally banned. So I decided to start building Splinter Twin instead. And in fact, just this past December, I finally got my playset of Splinter Twins to finish off my deck. And then, of course, that deck got banned as well. So for me personally, it makes me not want to invest in maybe the best deck or the most popular deck, even though I am a spike player and I'm trying to play the best deck in the format so that I can do as well as I can at tournaments. But stuff like that makes me not want to invest in a format where I might get this deck together, finally get all the cards I need, really learn that deck in and out, learn the meta, learn how to sideboard and everything, and then just have that deck banned, basically out the experience and all of that money that I've invested into that deck. So what do you think is a good way for players who are trying to get into Modern, maybe don't want to go for like a deck that might get banned right away?
Okay. Well, first off, I want to say that I don't think if you are truly a spiky player, I think you should still build what you see as the best deck. So I was just judging at Star City Regionals this weekend, and I can say the Eldrazi deck premiered on Friday at the Pro Tour. Half the people, I mean, that's a little bit much, but probably a solid quarter of the people at that event were on the Eldrazi deck. I think the true spikes in the world will be on whatever deck they want to play. Because even if the deck gets banned, your goal is just to earn enough money with the deck before it gets banned that you made up for the cost.
That's fair.
For the people who might not be able to get to as many events or don't think that they can do that but still want to be playing a deck that they think is really good, what you could do is you could look at what you think is the best deck right now. So let's go back to the time when Pod was the best deck. So then you have to think about what can you do to disrupt what that is doing. So you have to think, okay, what decks are good against this? Like, do you think Twin is good against this deck? Do you think Scapeshift is good against this deck? Do you think Living End is good against this deck? And I think you just want to pick whatever deck you think is good against it and build towards that. Because a deck's not going to exist in this metagame if it's terrible against everything but one deck. So even though you might lose one of your best matchups, you should still have good game against the field if that deck gets banned. Right. So I think that's where you want to be.
So do you think that it's safe to invest in the Eldrazi deck, and people who want to play that deck should get the cards together and actually build that deck? Or do you think that Wizards of the Coast is going to ban something in the near future?
I think that the deck will live through the next ban cycle. I think it is too early to ban it. I think that you need time to adapt, and I think players will adapt to it. There is a chance that the deck continues to be dominant, it continues to be oppressive, and I could see it getting banned down the line. I've been estimating that it will survive the next banning, but get banned at the next one. I can't say for sure that's what will happen, but that is my gut feeling.
Do you have any advice for players who are looking for something to maybe spice up their boards or to fix up their decks to help them beat the Eldrazi deck until we see something happen in the next ban cycle?
It depends on how scared of it you are and what colors you're in. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with it. I think Ensnaring Bridge is great, but if you want to be more proactive, like if you're in an Esper deck, for instance, you could be playing, if you go to Path the Reality Smasher, the fact that you have to discard something to stop it from getting countered, you can use that to your advantage. You could discard a Lockdown Smiter, so I guess I should have said ban. So, but you could do that.
I really like that idea, though.
Yeah, and if you're an Esper, you can discard a Big Game Hunter,
Anything with
play
madness.
it for its madness cost, and get to kill something else. And that is, as they say, big game.
That is big game.
So there's just a lot that you can do. You can up your number of kill spells. You can play Ensnaring Bridge, Worship, a card that a lot of people have been playing. I personally think that one's a little bit slow. I think people are overrating it.
I mean, it costs 4 mana, and you still have to have a creature on the board. So, they're only running up to 4 Dismember in the Eldrazi decks, but they're still going to be able to kill some of your creatures. And the deck is so fast that your life total might be threatened early to the point where you're going to have to chump with some of your creatures.
I do think you're asking for a lot if you play Worship. I know some people are playing Painter's Servant, a card that I have been known to cast a few times in Legacy.
Yes.
I don't think that that is the best answer for this deck, but it's something you can do if you're particularly terrified of it and you can't think of anything else. So there's lots of things you can do, but I think people will stop freaking out about it given time.
I agree. So you think that the format will eventually just settle down and people will adapt to it?
It's what typically happens. So I think it is a part of the metagame that is here to stay. Well, at least for a couple months. And I do think people should be prepared for it, but I think people are screaming the sky is falling when it's not.
I think that's a fair assessment of the meta. I think the Eldrazi deck is real, and I think it's going to be around in Modern for a while, and I think it's actually going to also see Legacy play.
Oh, absolutely. I saw my friend get destroyed by it at an event 2 weeks ago.
I actually did some testing with my brother, and the fact that they get to run a full 16 Soul Lands with City of Traders and Ancient Tomb, and then the Eldrazi Temple and the Eye of Ugin, along with 4 Wasteland and 4 Cavern of Souls, the deck just seems insane. It kind of takes Stompy to a new level in the Legacy format.
Yeah, it seems really good. Plus you get Warping Whale.
Warping Whale seems amazing in Legacy. Not only does it kill Mom and pretty much every other creature in Death and Taxes, it can also counter Terminus, Entreat, Natural Order, Green Sun Zenith, Reanimate, Exhume, Show and Tell, Infernal Tutor, Doomsday.
For the one random Doomsday player.
For the one random Doomsday player. It just has so many applications out of the sideboard or even the main deck in the Legacy version of the Eldrazi deck. I think that deck will also be playing probably a full play set of Thorn of Amethyst in their sideboard, because most of their things that they're casting are actually creatures, and then that's just going to make it even harder for the decks to cast all their non-creature spells.
Makes sense.
I don't know what else you want to talk about in Legacy. I can't think of anything. The deck is nuts. The deck is nuts. I think it's even better in Legacy than it is in Modern.
It's a distinct possibility. I know Paul Lynch, a big Legacy player in Maryland, is working on the deck right now. So,
the weekend of the Pro Tour, there was a Philly Legacy Series event, and there was an Eldrazi deck in the top 8, and it was almost card for card like the Modern list, except for obviously a few Legacy tweaks and upgrades.
Yeah, I believe that was actually his list. I think that was his friend that he sent.
I am really glad I didn't have to play against him.
I am also really glad I didn't have to
I got to
play
dodge him all day, and then he was the one who denied the split in the top 8, and he lost to Shardless Bug. And I don't know how. I don't know how you kill all their stuff with Abrupt Decays when they're playing Reality Smashers and Thought-Knot Seers, but maybe he just didn't draw well. I don't know.
I love denying splits. Had to throw that out there.
It is never my style, but I can respect the people that do it.
I get it. I like guaranteed value, but I also just like to dream crush everyone.
I like being the person who is like, yeah, I'll split, and then somebody denies the split, and then you crush that person.
Oh, that's a good
See,
feeling.
that's my personal enjoyment. You just like stop talking, and then you just like look at me and smile. You don't say anything. I'm just like, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm out of thoughts for the day.
Well, I mean, that's fine. We're at a perfect wrapping up point.
We
so-
are at a perfect wrapping up point. I'm sure Mapson could talk about Modern all night long, and he did, because it is 3:20 in the morning. But I'm going to go to bed.
I'm going to go play Magic.
That sounds awesome, and we'll see you next time.